Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at something just absolutely fascinating: the invisible forces that are literally building our world from the ground up. We're going to explore how borderless capital, massive digital platforms, and weaponized information actually shape our physical reality. It's like a giant puzzle where volatile fortunes of the world's richest people somehow connect to the outbreak of kinetic wars. The entire architecture of global influence has radically shifted, and the crazy part? We have the exact data to prove it. And to show you just how incredibly volatile this new architecture really is, think about this number: $118 billion. Think about that for a second. That's the exact amount Elon Musk's net worth dropped in a single adjustment. I mean, wow, this massive plunge pulled his fortune all the way down to a mere $957 billion. It literally stripped him of his historic first-of-its-kind trillionaire status less than a month after he actually achieved it. So to understand how these massive digital forces actually ripple out into the real world, here's our roadmap for today. We're covering Musk's wealth fluctuations, the SpaceX IPO factor, funding a media proxy, information as a weapon, and finally, physical versus digital reality. Basically, we're going to trace a macro-level path from digital finance straight into kinetic physical conflict. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Musk's wealth fluctuations, and see what actually caused this historic, mind-blowing drop. Now, you might be thinking a $118 billion loss means, factories burned down or car sales totally plummeted. But nope, they didn't. This wasn't a business failure at all. Actually, scratch that. It was purely an algorithmic adjustment. Bloomberg changed its data methodology, excluding roughly 286 million unvested Tesla shares tied to Musk's 2018 Performance Award. That one little digital reclassification wiped out $111 billion from his calculated fortune just like that. But it was also coupled with a massive sell-off in another one of his ventures. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, the SpaceX IPO factor. This was the second huge driver of that crazy wealth fluctuation. Now, what's really interesting about how these assets are structured is that it shows just how heavily concentrated this digital wealth is in only a few massive, transnational entities. Sure, Musk holds about 11% of Tesla, but SpaceX has totally become his biggest asset. It hit a staggering $1.8 trillion valuation following its landmark June 2026 public offering. Throw in private ventures like xAI and Neuralink, and you're looking at an entire empire built almost completely on digital and aerospace infrastructure. But as we all know, the market is completely ruthless. After that historic public listing on June 16th, investors started aggressively taking profits. They were cashing out fast. By June 22nd, SpaceX stock had tumbled by 16%. In just 3 days of trading, nearly $1 trillion was completely wiped off the company's market cap. $1 trillion gone in 3 days. So, what does this all mean? We're looking at algorithmic, totally borderless wealth that shifts by hundreds of billions of dollars just based on data methodologies and rapid stock sell-offs. The big question is, how exactly does this kind of financial architecture shape geopolitical reality? How do these offshore funds and digital platforms translate into actual, physical world events? Well, let's find out in Section 3, funding a media proxy. We're going to pivot to the Middle East to look at a real-world example of this algorithmic funding in action. Specifically, we'll impartially examine a London-based Iranian opposition news site called Iran International. The Financial Times recently put out data detailing how this particular media outlet survived absolutely crushing financial losses through some incredibly opaque offshore restructuring. We're talking about the network's parent company, Valant Media UK, reporting a $550 million operational deficit and owing $645 million in internal liabilities. To survive, in December 2024, they executed an $870 million debt for equity swap. No new cash came in at all. They basically just traded their massive debt for ownership shares, transferring the whole shebang to an opaque offshore company called Infocast Cayman Limited. And this brilliantly illustrates the hidden corporate webs driving global narratives. When researchers traced the Cayman holding company, they found its sole director is Saleh Hussein Al-Dawais. According to the data, a person with that exact name serves as the chief operations officer of the Saudi Research and Media Group, which is a massive, state-backed giant in Saudi Arabia. This effectively links the financial survival of an independent UK-based outlet directly to Saudi state-backed interests, masking international influence behind, you guessed it, offshore equity swaps. This brings us to Section 4, Information as a Weapon.
Let's slow down a bit here, because this is where the offshore money and the digital broadcasts cross over into cognitive warfare and very real physical danger.
An extensive open-source intelligence, or OSINT, report analyzes this network not just as a news channel, but as a hardcore strategic asset. According to the report, Iran International commands a massive 33% audience share inside Iran. To put that into perspective, that's 80 million people domestically, plus another 10 million in the diaspora. The analysis points out that penetrating this closed information environment acts as a critical breach of the Iranian regime's cognitive perimeter. It totally challenges the state's monopoly on reality, giving people a completely different version of events than what the government is telling them. Because of this immense reach, the Iranian state treats the network as a literal kinetic threat, classifying it as a terrorist organization. And the documented retaliation against the network's staff is severe. We're talking about verified death threats directed at 45 journalists. Intelligence assessments show systematic pressure on 315 family members within Iran, a tactic classified as emotional hostage-taking. And this spills right over into physical violence, like the March 2023 physical attack and stabbing of presenter Porya Zerati right on the streets of London.
Now let's move to and see how this builds, because it escalates toward actual conflict incredibly fast. We start with that offshore debt swap in December 2024. Just 1 month later, in January 2025, the network reports massive protest casualties. Throughout 2025, we see a rapid escalation of proxy battles. You can literally map a direct, timeline-driven path straight from offshore financing into the outbreak of the Second Iranian War in February 2026.
Let's look really closely at that January 2025 event. Iran International reported that 36,500 people were killed in protest crackdowns. That's a number significantly higher than Western human rights estimates. The OSINT document theorizes that this was an algorithmic data poisoning event purposefully designed to create a cognitive resonance that justified external intervention. According to the analysis, U.S. President Trump allegedly cited casualty numbers similar to these to help legitimize launching the war on February 28.
Once the kinetic conflict actually began, the media outlet actively participated in the theater of war. The OSN documents show how Iran International counterleaked what's known as the IRGC's Hydra Protocol. This was basically a bureaucratized instruction manual detailing the tactical movement of military assets into civilian infrastructure, like schools and hospitals. By leaking this, they effectively exposed the regime's strategy of using the population as a human shield.
And that leads us directly to our final section, physical versus digital reality. We spent this whole explainer looking at invisible forces, stock algorithms, Cayman offshore accounts, satellite broadcasts, but they all eventually crash right back into the physical world.
Look at how the physical world is literally forced to react to this instability. In the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the most critical maritime choke points on Earth, the physical reality of shipping had to be secured. Oman, in coordination with the UN's International Maritime Organization, had to open a temporary, toll-free transit corridor just to maintain the freedom of navigation. The physical effect of that? Immediate. Global oil prices dropped over 1% as a direct result of securing this very real physical shipping lane.
There is a really stark juxtaposition at play here. On one side, we have this digital and financial architecture. It's an algorithmic shield made up of offshore media proxies, data poisoning, and billion-dollar stock valuation shifting overnight. But on the exact opposite side, we have unyielding physical reality. We're talking kinetic conflicts, the physical geography of shipping lanes, the solid concrete of bunkers, and the very real casualties of war.
The OSINT analysis synthesizes all of this through the concept of digital neo-feudalism. It basically suggests that modern techno-elites, whether we're talking about billionaires like Elon Musk with his orbital satellite clusters or state-backed offshore media empires, are attempting to build sovereign power completely independent of physical state borders. It's like they're using capital and information as a shield, operating from digital and legal bunkers to pull the strings of the physical world from afar.
But the analysis leaves us with a really powerful final thought. It states, the soil always wins. History shows us that technological hubris eventually crashes against biological and geological limits. Mountains remain higher than flags, and concrete bunkers outlast digital streams. So the question I'll leave you with today is this. As our world becomes increasingly dictated by offshore algorithms and borderless digital influence, can these invisible forces ever truly escape the gravity of our physical reality? Think about that for a while. Keep your eyes open and always keep questioning what you see on the screen.